Well, thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate you taking your time to spend a little bit of time here on this day, this morning. Today we're going to cover SB 721 balcony inspections and all the ins and outs. And so let me share my screen so we can get started. My name is Tony Escamilla. I'm the owner of Villa Property Inspections. We have been in business for 27 years now here in the San Gabriel Valley area. We're located in Claremont, but we cover everything in all of Los Angeles County, Orange County, and some of the Inland Empire. I won't go bore you with all the details of the certifications, but those are some of the certifications that I carry. I'm a licensed general contractor, a building inspector. I am a post-disaster structural inspector as well. Recently, I was out in the fires in Altadena right after they happened and assessing some of the damage of the properties that burned down. And it's just really, really tragic. My heart goes out to all of those families. We also do residential inspections, single family home inspections for sale, multifamily buildings, commercial inspections like office buildings, warehouses, things like that, sewer camera inspections, mold inspections, moisture detection, of course, balcony inspections, which is what we're going to talk about today. One of the things that we have started doing recently, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, is insurance inspections because there's been such a demand on insurance inspections. And then lastly, a new service that we're going to be offering starting this coming week is home hardening inspections. Due to the recent fires and the ongoing fire right now in Santa Clarita, a lot of people are asking how they can protect their home during a wildfire so that they don't have the same outcome that tragically a lot of people in these last fires had. And so we're going to be holding an event on February 1st in Upland, and it's going to be a live event, and we're going to be discussing all of those things and how you can harden your home and protect your home from wildfire. So there'll be some more information to come on that. So today's agenda, we're going to cover what is SB 721, what must be inspected, what is a deadline, who can inspect the balconies, what must the inspection cover. There's a lot of questions about what it should and shouldn't cover. Are drilled holes required? And I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant about this in a little while, so you're going to want to hang around, and particularly at the end. Do I need an engineer to do my balcony inspections? What do I do with my report? Once I have my report and the inspection has been done, what do I do with it? What's my next step? And what if any repairs are required? What happens then? And last but not least is beware of contractor. And like I said, you can definitely want to stick around for that because I have some choice words about some of the practices that have been going on recently regarding balcony inspections. So first, what is SB 721? There's two dates to remember about SB 721. The first one is June 16, 2015. On that day, on this photograph, what you see here, this balcony right here on the 5th story of this building, this was in Berkeley, California. This balcony collapsed all the way down to the street, killing 6 students and injuring several other people. They were celebrating somebody's 21st birthday, and tragically, the balcony was a little overloaded, but it still shouldn't have collapsed in the manner in which it did. So consequently, in September of 2018, the Senate passed SB 721. Shortly thereafter, they passed SB 326. And so today we're going to be covering 721, which pertains to apartment buildings. SB 326 pertains to condominiums, and that law is slightly different. It's very similar, but it's slightly different than SB 721. So we'll cover SB 721 in detail today. So what buildings must be inspected under SB 721? I just alluded to it right now. It is for apartment buildings with 3 or more units. SB 326, like I said, is for condominium complexes, and it's slightly different than SB 721. When must this happen? I'm sure you've probably heard in the news that the deadline was extended for SB 721 for apartments to get your balconies extended to the end of this year in 2025. Now, I highly recommend that you don't wait until the end of 2025 to get balconies inspected, and I'll go over why in a minute. But basically, the demand is going to increase as we approach the deadline, just like we saw in 2024. And things got really crazy towards the end of 2024. People were having difficulty scheduling inspections, scheduling repairs. And yeah, it got a little crazy until the deadline was extended in late October. Once you have your balconies inspected, you're not required to inspect them again for another 6 years. So it's basically every 6 years. So in this photograph, I'm going to leave this up just a little bit so you can get a good view of what needs to actually be inspected. Everything in the blue here and here is what needs to be inspected. Basically, anything that extends outside the exterior walls of the building and is wood framed needs to be inspected, unless it's under 6 feet from the ground. So walkways on second stories and third stories between apartments, which is very typical. Individual balconies for individual apartments need to be inspected. The railings need to be inspected. All of the stairs, if it's wood framed, it needs to be inspected. Now, there are some steel framed stairs out there, and I still recommend that be inspected, though it is technically exempt, because the critical part on the stairs, not necessarily the stairs, is where these stairs connect to the wood frame structure above. And so I always recommend those get inspected as well. But yeah, I have a lot of questions. Are rooftop decks required to be inspected, or are terraces? If it's fully supported by the structure below, it's not required. It's only anything that extends out here. And sometimes some of these balconies are indented into the building, and those are technically outside of the exterior walls of the building, so that still needs to be inspected. And basically, here's what it says. It says, including their supports and railings, balconies, decks, porches, stairways, walkways, and entry structures that extend beyond the exterior walls of the building and have a walking surface that is elevated more than 6 feet. Okay, so who can inspect your balconies? And I will get into this a little bit later on, because while these people can inspect your balcony, it's not necessarily recommended, at least not initially. So a licensed architect, a civil or structural engineer, a general contractor holding any of these licenses here. Now, we carry a general contractor's license, which is a B contractor's license. We're also certified building inspectors, and so we do these inspections. Individual certified as building inspector or building official. Basically, what this means is that anybody who's certified by an organization like the International Code Council, the ICC, can do this if they're certified as a building inspector. And the ICC is the organization that basically writes all the building codes for all of the local cities throughout the state, actually throughout the country. And the local cities adopt these building codes, and then that's what your building inspectors come out and inspect with. Now, interestingly enough, and this is where I start going into a little bit of a rant here about SB-721. When SB-721 initially passed, this section here was included in SB-721 and stated that no recommended repair shall be performed by a licensed contractor who is also serving as the inspector. Sadly, after the bill was passed, this section was removed from the bill. And there's some speculation that there was lobbying in Sacramento about letting contractors do inspections, and so it was removed. And so now your contractor, your inspector, who happens to be a contractor, can also do the repair work for you. And I think that poses a huge conflict of interest. I've heard some horror stories from some of the property management companies, and I'll get into it a little bit more at the end of our discussion today. What must the inspection cover? The inspection must cover the load-bearing components. So this is a typical balcony here, and a little different than most apartments, but by load-bearing components, it means the beams, the posts, how is the structure supported, basically. Associated waterproofing. How is this covered? Is it painted? What type of flooring does it have right here? I had one just yesterday. I saw a photograph from one of my inspectors that they had bare plywood, construction grade plywood on top right here. And that's not meant to be used for exterior use. And they had just painted it. So naturally it was rotting out, it was coming loose. And so we called that out. The current condition of all of these things right here, and the expectations for future service performance and service life. Given the condition of the balcony, if no repairs or maintenance is done, this is what we expect. And if it is maintained properly, then we expect it to have its full lifespan. Recommendations for any repairs or replacements. Now, we go a little bit above and beyond SB-721 with our inspections, and I think most other inspectors should if they're not already. If we're already there, there's no reason why we can't make a recommendation. That's not necessarily required by SB-721, but I definitely recommend it. For example, the railings. I see a lot of railings that are really wide on older buildings. So our report is going to make the recommendation that you bring this up to current code, which is that these balusters right here are supposed to be no more than 4 inches wide. Now, again, we do separate between what's required and what's recommended. And that helps you as a property manager or property owner plan, schedule, budget for eventual upgrades and repairs. 15%. SB-721 says, and this is where it differs from SB-326, that if you, let's say you have 20 identical balconies like this one right here, technically you only have to have 15% of those inspected. Now, I always recommend that if we're going to be there, that we inspect all of the balconies, like I said, so that you as a property manager or the property owner can schedule, you can budget, and you can plan. But I understand that financially, it's just not feasible on some of the larger properties. We inspected one that was like 68 buildings last year, and that's just not financially feasible to inspect every single balcony. So I get it why they would do it, but if you only have a few balconies and a few stairs in your building, I recommend inspecting all of it. Even if you don't necessarily do the work immediately, at least, like I said, you can budget, you can plan for it, you can schedule it with your contractors or schedule it with your handyman. Yeah, SB-326, by the way, requires 95% of all the balconies to be inspected. And that's because primarily on HOAs, they're owner occupied, and so they want all of the balconies inspected. What if repairs are required in your building? We go and we do the inspection. There's some repairs that need to be done. What happens now? And I get this question a lot. And basically, it's broken down into 3 separate categories. And the first one is an immediate threat. Is the balcony, and by immediate threat, I mean the balcony looks like it's going to collapse. It has a lot of rot damage. The railings are coming loose, they're falling off, and it poses a threat to the occupant if they step on the balcony. We had one, my inspector sent me a photo recently where the subfloor right here, there was a hole on the subfloor, and you can literally put your foot right through it. That's what we consider an immediate threat. That's going to cause injury to the occupant. And if it's an immediate threat, the building owner is supposed to prevent access to that balcony and make immediate repairs. Now, sometimes it's not an individual balcony like this. Sometimes it's a walkway that extends all the way across between different apartments. And so that poses a problem that if you cordon that off, how are all the other tenants going to get in and out of their units? When it's an immediate threat, it really should be cordoned off. So when it's an immediate threat, and only when it's an immediate threat, are we required by SB-721 to submit a copy of that report to the local building department. And that's just so that they can keep track of the repairs that need to be done. And there's a lot of misinformation that has been put out there, and I'm going to get to it in a little while, about what building departments are doing. And I've heard a lot of myths about fines, daily fines, and how much, and all of that stuff. And I'll get to that in a second. Only in this situation are we required to submit the report to the local building department. not under any other circumstances. I've heard a lot of people saying that they've been told that the report is immediately going to be sent to the building department and they have X amount of days and they're going to get fined. That's simply not true, but I'll clear that up in a second. In those situations, if it's an immediate threat and there's a lot of damage to the balcony, it's very likely that you're going to require a building permit. And that's where the building department gets involved. If you are required to have a building permit. So the other category is non-immediate threat, but you have permits. But if you're required to pull permits, even as an immediate threat or a non-immediate threat, let's say we find some rot damage and you have to open up the stucco on the underside here, or like you see in this photograph right here, that requires permits. This may not be an immediate threat right here, but it still requires permits. In that case, the property owner has 120 days to obtain the building permits. And they also have, once they obtain the building permits, they have 120 days to make the necessary repairs, unless they get an extension from the building department. For example, like on this photograph here, if they're midway through construction and they're reaching towards the end of the 120 days, most local building departments are going to grant them an extension and give them another 120 days to get the work done. And that's where some of the misinformation out there is that regardless of what type of work you have, that you have to pull permits. If it's not an immediate threat and there's no permit required, that's the third category. So this pertains to maintenance and minor repairs only. For example, if you need caulking or patching, caulking where the railing, for example, meets the wall, or where the floor meets the wall. Sometimes there's a small crack right there and that just requires caulking. Or there's a little bit of damage to the floor and that requires patching and painting. That falls under this category here. It's not an immediate threat, number one, and no permits are required. About 90% of our inspections fall under this, and we've done several thousand balconies since the beginning of last year, and about 90% fall under this category. Now, have there been some really ugly ones? Yes, there has been some really ugly ones where they needed immediate work, or we at least told them, hey, listen, it's not immediate, but you really do need a contractor on this. And yeah, for this category, no permits are required. If all you're doing is touching up some paint, doing some caulking, that's just regular maintenance work. You don't need a permit. You don't need a contractor. You can have your handyman put that on their list, schedule it, and get that taken care of. And that's just part of regular maintenance. And there is no need to notify the building department. Again, this is where a lot of misinformation is out there, that the building department is going to come and knock on your door on this. If what your balconies need is just some maintenance work, nobody is going to come knocking on your door. What do you do with your report? So we did our inspection now, and what do you do with the report? I get this question a lot, and the short of it is nothing. Nothing for right now, at least. You hold on to the report. Currently, there are very few cities that actually have their own ordinance regarding balcony inspections. You have to remember that this is a state law, and so a lot of the cities are now starting to implement their own local ordinances pertaining to SB-721. And how is a city going to get involved or apply SB-721 locally? Several of the local cities have already implemented. And basically what they've done is they basically adopted SB-721 verbatim. They haven't changed anything, and they've just adopted it as is. City of Los Angeles, for example, opened up an online portal, and that portal is for us inspectors in the event of an emergency situation that we can submit a copy of the report to the building department. And that's how the building department gets involved. Now, the reality of this is that the local cities are not going to get involved otherwise. And I'll touch on that right now. So can your local city make the law more restrictive? Yes, they can. They could make it a lot stricter. They just can't make it less restrictive than the state code. Now, in speaking to a lot of the local cities, around here because I keep in contact with some of the building inspectors and some of the local building departments. Most cities right now have told me that they just simply do not have the resources to enforce SB 721. Is that good news? Not necessarily for a property owner, because you still need to take care of the requirements for SB 721 to limit your liability, and I'll touch on that on the next slide. But they don't have the manpower. Most cities don't have the manpower to be checking every apartment to see whether you've gotten your inspection done and have you completed the work. Most of them have told me that the only time that they're going to get involved is if there's an emergency situation. And in that case, it's understandable that they get involved and they follow through on that. What you're looking at here, these are our actual numbers from last year, from 2024, from when the beginning of 2024 throughout the end of the year. And the reason why I put this here is that you'll see that from July through about October, by the time we hit this peak in October, we were pulling our hair out last year, trying to keep up with the balcony inspections, because some of the larger property management companies that manage 100, 200 buildings were calling and saying, hey, we have 100 buildings and we need to get these inspected because the property owners that we represent are wanting this to be done to limit their liability and limit our liability to them. And so it created quite the frenzy of people looking for balcony inspections, and also opened up the door for some unscrupulous practices, some price gouging, and quite frankly, some fraudulent activity. And I'll touch on that in a little bit. SB 326, which pertains to condominiums, did not get extended last year. They had the same deadline of the end of the year last year. So I'm anticipating that it's going to be very unlikely that SB 721 is going to be extended again beyond the end of this year. So that is going to cause, I'm expecting that it's going to cause another spike like this, because most people are going to wait till at least the middle of the year to start scheduling their inspections, and they're going to find that it's going to be difficult to, one, to schedule inspections. Two, it's going to be difficult to schedule repairs because there's not enough contractors right now. Sadly, right now, there's a shortage in contractors because of the fires. All of the fires, all of those homes that need to be rebuilt and repaired due to these ongoing fires, there's going to be a huge shortage of contractors. And it really does open the door for some unscrupulous practices like what we're hearing right now. A lot of scams that are going on pertaining to the ongoing fires right now. The other reason why you don't want to procrastinate in getting your balcony inspections. I'm sure you've probably heard this in the news, and we've actually had to adapt and start doing these inspections, is that insurance here in California, there's a good video on our website if you want to get a little more information about this. Insurance companies in California are pulling out of California. State Farm announced in 2024 that it would not renew approximately 72,000 policies, and 42,000 of those were multifamily apartment buildings, and only 30,000 were single family occupied. Allstate basically is getting out of California altogether. They are not writing any new policies for residential, commercial, or multifamily right now. And come renewal time, they're just canceling policies. And so we have gotten a lot of phone calls because of this, because companies like Mercury, for example, Mercury is requiring inspections now when it's time to renew your policy. And basically the inspection is, what condition is the roof in? Do you have dangerous electrical panels like Federal Pacific Electric, Zinsco? And if that's the case, that's an automatic denial of insurance. I live in an apartment, and last year the entire building they had to replace all of the electrical panels for the exact same reason, because the insurance company wouldn't renew their policy. All of the others I've been hearing, and I can't confirm this 100%, but I have heard from a few property management companies that come renewal time, that insurance companies are now starting to ask for the balcony inspections as well. Because they know that this is a law in California, they're now starting to ask for copies of the inspection reports as well. And in that case, and this is why I say you probably shouldn't procrastinate in getting your balcony inspections, because in that case, they won't renew your insurance policy. So if you have heard anything about that, please let me know. If you've gotten any notices like that, let me know, because I'm trying to keep track of who is doing what, which insurance companies, so that I can adapt and we can provide better services for you as we go through this. So this is what I was alluding to pretty much the entire time that I've been talking right now. And I promise I'll make this as short as possible, but I feel very, very adamant about this, is beware of contractor. As soon as SB 721 and 326 passed, a lot of contractors started popping up on the internet posing as balcony inspectors. And if you go online, you'll see some of the companies right now. And if you do a little bit of research on their licenses, you're going to see that they are basically a construction company, not an inspector. And they're basically just trying to generate construction business. So they're going to scare you. They're going to tell you you need all of this work. They're going to provide you with an estimate. And I've heard numerous stories about this. Provide you with estimates, $10, $15, $20,000 worth of work on your balconies, which in my opinion, most of the time is not necessary. It's interesting how this section of the original law was removed, not allowing contractors to be your inspectors or vice versa. And that opened the floodgates for contractors to come in here and pose as balcony inspectors. I've researched a few of these companies that are online, and I have found out through the Contractor State License Board, they also have a license to do ADUs, to do structural seismic retrofitting, to do plumbing, electrical, stuff like that. They're basically construction companies. And this is just an avenue for them to generate construction income. I recommend, if you haven't already, please go on our blog. Before you work with any contractor to do any repair work on your building, whether it be the balconies or anything like that, please read this article that I wrote. It's tips for hiring a contractor. And it breaks down some of the stuff that I just said right now, like checking their licenses and checking reviews and websites, and finding out, do they actually have a license, or are they renting a license from somebody else? So all of that information is on this article. I highly recommend you take a read. I'm going to make a video about this, so hopefully I'll have that up fairly soon on our website. One of the other things that I get a lot, I get questions from people who call in, is destructive testing required? A lot of these companies are telling people that they need to drill holes in their balconies, or they need to cut holes on the balconies to be able to put a camera in there and do their inspection. There is nowhere on our website, the URL is down here at the bottom of the screen. On our website, there's a link to the SB 721 as it's written. There is nowhere on that law that states that you need to drill holes on your balcony and stick cameras in there. It's a scare tactic that some of these companies are using to sell you unnecessary construction services. I have these cameras. We use them for a variety of different inspection services that we offer, like sewer inspections and everything from the smallest cameras to the biggest cameras. They're not meant for this. You don't get quality pictures, and it's unnecessary. Is a structural engineer, and I touched on this a little while ago, is a structural engineer required to come and do your initial assessment on your balconies? The answer is a resounding no. It's not required. A lot of these companies are sending structural engineers to do your initial balcony inspection. That is like sending a heart surgeon to do your physical exam. It's not necessary unless something stands out during the initial inspection. And I've heard of some of these engineers charging $1,500, $2,000 just to do your initial inspection, to tell you that there's nothing wrong and all you really need is maintenance work on your balcony. We are a 100% unbiased. I am a licensed general contractor for the last 25 years now, but we don't do any construction service. And I think that the law should have stayed written the way it was, and it shouldn't have been changed. Having said that, There are some instances where there is additional investigation that needs to be done. When we go to an inspection and we see that the railings are pulling apart from the wall, for example, the floor is sloped in the wrong direction, or it's leaning a little too far. Or if we look at the underside of a balcony and the stucco is falling off, there's obviously moisture damage. In those situations, yes, we're going to say, okay, just like when you go get your physical exam, if your doctor sees that your blood pressure is too high or something like that, they're going to recommend a specialist come in. At that point, we're going to tell you, hey, listen, read our article on how to hire a contractor, bring in your contractor, bring in your handyman. Now you want to open up the underside of that balcony. Now you want to put cameras in there. Now you want to bring in a contractor to take a look at it, or maybe in some rare cases, bring in the structural engineer. But there are some cases of that. But like I said, for the most part, 90% of what we inspect out there does not require that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I know I went a little bit of a rant out there because I've heard all the stories when we go do these expos for the apartment associations, and people walk up and they tell me all their horror stories and how much they paid for their balcony inspections. And so I wanted to put some of this information out there. So hopefully you don't have that, or anybody that you might be representing doesn't have that kind of experience. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you might have.